The screen door creaked open behind me as I dried my hands on the towel. I'd just finished rinsing out the coffee pot when my phone buzzed across the counter. Ethan's name lit up. I answered on the third ring. "Hi, honey." His voice came cheerful, rushed. "Hey, Mom. Quick thing. Sabrina's bringing her family this weekend. It'll be 12 of us total. Hope that's okay?" I didn't speak. Before I could form a word, I heard her voice in the background, sharp, clipped. "We'll take the rooms with the view. She can use the laundry nook." The line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, phone still in my hand, the towel bunched in my fingers. The faucet continued to drip behind me, steady, indifferent. 12. They were coming here, my house, my quiet place by the water. Without asking, without even pretending to ask, I walked to the window, the one over the sink that looked straight out onto the dunes. Morning mist still curled along the sand. No footsteps yet, just the steady churn of water brushing against the shore. I leaned forward, letting the glass cool my forehead. I'd repainted that back bedroom myself last fall, the one with the ocean view. Hung sheer curtains pressed every corner smooth. That was supposed to be mine. Now I was being told to sleep beside the washing machine. I wiped the edge of the counter and folded the towel carefully, too carefully. Then I placed it down and walked to the hall closet. Inside was the old wicker basket where I kept extra sets of sheets. I pulled it down, set it on the table, and stared at the folded linens stacked inside. I didn't move them. I didn't make up the nook. I just closed the basket. The sound of tires crunching gravel pulled me from the back hallway. I glanced at the clock, 9:07 a.m. I hadn't even had breakfast. Through the front window, I counted the vehicles. 4, a minivan, a pickup, a rented SUV, one with a kayak strapped to the top. Doors flew open before engines even shut off. Kids spilled out first barefoot, already yelling. One carried a pool float the size of a refrigerator. Sabrina's mother walked past me with a suitcase on wheels, not so much as a hello. I watched as she disappeared down the hallway, my hallway, her bangles jingling like bells. I turned and found her in my bedroom opening drawers. "This one has the best light," she said, placing her purse on my dresser. "Great spot for my meditation." Before I could respond, 2 teenage cousins marched through the front door, hauling a rolled-up futon between them. Another followed with a slow cooker. The last time I saw her was at Ethan's wedding. She'd mistaken me for catering. Ethan appeared in the doorway, sunglasses pushed up on his head, grinning like it was all a surprise party. He hugged me quickly, already distracted. "We brought a few extras. Sabrina didn't want to leave anyone out. We'll get out of your hair once we're settled." I nodded. I didn't say a word. The hallway echoed with voices. Someone had turned on the speaker in the kitchen. My grocery list sat untouched on the table beside it. I walked into the kitchen, filled the kettle, and clicked it on. I moved slowly, methodically. Let the noise pass around me like wind. When the tea was steeping, I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. The air outside was still cool. I dialed the number from memory. The inn next door answered on the second ring. "Do you have a vacancy?" I asked. "Yes," the woman replied. "Ocean view or courtyard?" I looked at my house, my bedroom, my ocean. "Courtyard," I said. And I asked how early I could check in. It was just after 10 when my phone buzzed again. I was sitting on the edge of the guest bed at the inn, the TV remote untouched beside me. The room was quiet. No footsteps overhead. No cartoons blaring from the living room. The message was from Lauren. No words, just a link. I tapped it. It opened to Sabrina's public profile. The first image loaded slowly, a wide shot of my porch. My front steps. The morning sunlight still fresh on the railings. The caption read, "So excited to spend the summer in our new beach house." New beach house. Ours. I scrolled. Photos of the kids on my lawn chairs. Sabrina's cousins unpacking in front of my garage. Someone had set a beach towel on the dining table like it was part of the decor. The comments were even worse. Wow, finally. So happy for you. Looks like you finally got what you deserve. I shut the laptop slowly. My fingers were cold. There had been no conversations, no offer, no mention of rent. Yet they'd already written a version of the truth that suited them better. I stood and walked across the room. In my closet back home, I had packed one small box I hadn't touched since Nate passed. That box wasn't sentimental. It wasn't full of letters or photos. It held documents, the kind no one ever thinks they'll need until it's too late. I hadn't opened that drawer in months. I'd almost forgotten the key was still on my spare keychain. But now, standing in a stranger's quiet room, while my house lit up someone else's timeline, I realized it was time to look again. I reached for my purse, slipped the key into my pocket, and started walking back home. The drawer stuck for a moment before it gave way with a sigh, like it knew I'd been avoiding it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and dust. I slid out the manila folder and placed it on the kitchen table. The trust was right where I'd left it signed, sealed, notarized last September. Every page carried my name alone. Not Ethan's, not Sabrina's, just mine. Beneath it lay the deed to the house and a folder marked System Manual. I remembered the technician who'd installed everything last year. You'll be able to control every circuit remotely, he'd said, walking me through the app. At the time, I'd just wanted the convenience automatic lights timers for heating. I hadn't thought I'd need it for defense. Outside the window, I could see the glow of porch lights across the sand. Laughter drifted faintly through the open air, the kind that comes from people too comfortable in someone else's space. They thought I was quiet because I was weak, that my hands were soft because I'd stopped working. They didn't know those same hands had signed off on million-dollar budgets, balanced accounts that could have buried a careless man. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts. First, I called my lawyer. We hadn't spoken since the estate paperwork after Nate died. His voice came through steady, warm, the way professionals sound when they already know what you're going to ask. Yes, Ms. Halley, he said. Everything is still active. The property's secure under the trust. You're the sole beneficiary. Good, I replied. Then I'd like to make one small amendment. When that call ended, I dialed another number, Rick Turner. He'd run the goat rescue 2 towns over for years, the kind of man who never asked too many questions. He picked up on the second ring. Meredith been too long. Rick, I said, glancing toward the lights in my house. How would you like to spend the weekend at the beach? He laughed, not yet, knowing how serious I was. By Sunday morning, everything would be ready. I left the house just after sunrise. No one noticed. They were still asleep, probably exhausted from late-night games, and helping themselves to my liquor cabinet. I walked back to the inn. The balcony overlooked everything: my porch, the garden, the swing I'd hung for Ethan when he was 8. It all looked smaller from up here, almost manageable. At 3:02 p.m., I watched the first signs of confusion. Sabrina came out onto the porch in a tank top waving a makeshift fan. The AC unit must have stopped humming. An hour later, 2 cousins appeared on the front lawn with their phones held high, pacing like hunters. I'd scheduled the Wi-Fi to cut at 4 sharp. By 6, the fridge would already be warming, and the dishwasher would beep angrily before shutting itself down. I knew the patterns. I'd set the cycles myself. I sipped my tea as I watched the patio fill with bodies and frustration. Someone tried flipping breakers I'd disabled manual override last winter. They wouldn't find out until morning that the garbage disposal also reset itself after a full system timeout. I'd left one thing behind, though, a note, taped neatly to the guest room door. This property resets for cleaning at noon on Monday. No storage permitted after checkout. It was printed in polite font. No underlines. No exclamation points. Just a reminder. By the time the porch lights flickered off, they were arguing on the lawn, and I was already making a list of everything they had never bothered to ask. By mid-morning, the cousins had stripped down to tank tops and boxer shorts, sprawled on the porch like sunburned laundry. One of them dragged a fan from the back of a car and plugged it into an extension cord that promptly shorted. I watched the sparks fly from my balcony. Sabrina came storming out next, barefoot and furious, holding the panel from the breaker box like it had betrayed her personally. She kicked over a potted plant that used to sit by my porch swing. The ceramic cracked clean in half. She didn't even look down. At 10:41, Ethan texted, "Mom, what is going on?" I didn't respond. At 11:03, "The power's acting crazy. Is something wrong with the system?" Again, nothing. By 11:22, he tried again. "Can you at least call me? This is getting embarrassing." Still, I stayed silent. At noon, Sharp Rick's trailer pulled up right on schedule. He opened the latch and coaxed two goats, Dottie and Clara, down the ramp. "They're trained for yard work," he said, with a wink, setting down a small bag of pellets. They didn't head for the yard. They found the patio door wide open and wandered inside like they'd been invited. I saw one of the smaller kids shriek and run as Clara clambered up a dining chair. Someone shouted, "Get it out," and another voice yelled back, "I thought you closed the door." I heard Sabrina screaming before I even saw her. One of the cousins tried to grab a broom, the other pulled out their phone. A minute later, someone from the porch was calling animal control. I caught the words, "trespassing livestock," before the signal dropped. From where I sat, it looked like nature reclaiming space. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. I uncapped my pen and began writing full names, clear handwriting. The list wasn't long, but it was precise. Below the names, I started calculating numbers. The weekend wasn't over yet. He knocked just after 8. I'd heard footsteps in the hallway a few minutes before, slow and hesitant like he wasn't sure he had the right room. When I opened the door, Ethan looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, hair unbrushed. The usual easy confidence was gone. He didn't step inside. He began, eyes shifting to the floor. I came to talk. "Everything's falling apart over there." I stepped aside but didn't say a word. He stood in the doorway rubbing his palms together. "Why didn't you say anything?" I folded my arms. "You didn't ask." He winced. "It's just Sabrina thought I cut him off. She posted about inheriting the house. Before I died." He blinked. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. "Did you think I wouldn't see it?" He looked smaller somehow. Not like a child, not quite, but like a man who just realized he'd bet on the wrong version of the story. "I didn't know," he muttered. "I mean, I didn't read the caption that way." "No," I said, reaching for my bag. "You didn't read at all." I handed him the envelope, white, unsealed, firm from the documents inside. He took it without looking down, like it might burn through his hands. "That includes the terms of the trust," I said, "and a summary of what was used. Utilities, property wear, cleaning fees. Oh, and the temporary animal care clause? You'll find that toward the end." He turned the envelope over once, then again. "I don't want to fight," he said quietly. "I don't either." For a moment, we just stood there. No raised voices, no pleading, just the weight of everything that had gone unsaid pressing in. He nodded, once sharp and low, then turned to leave. I closed the door behind him and locked it gently. And when I sat down at the desk, I opened a new folder and began drafting the notice I would need for Monday morning. The next morning, I sat on the porch of the inn with a cup of coffee and watched Ethan walk across the gravel lot, envelope still in hand. He didn't knock this time. He didn't even come up the stairs. Just sat on the bench outside the office and opened the papers. I could see the way his eyes scanned the first page, hesitant at first, then slower, more deliberate. He flipped past the cover letter and into the lease I'd drafted last fall, back when I first started suspecting I'd need one. It was short, just a page and a half. Clear language. Plain font. Nothing confusing. Clause 7 stated in bold, "The property is not available for group occupancy, shared arrangements, or temporary lodging of non-family units without the express written consent of the owner." He paused there. I saw his thumb hold the page like he wanted to tear it, but he didn't. He turned to the next document, a summary of expenses. Electricity surged 40% over 3 days. Water, nearly double. Repairs, 2 cabinet doors, 1 patio. Chair, a broken latch on the outdoor shower. There was a cleaning estimate from a local service, and below that, a goat handler's fee. No fines, no penalties, just numbers. Just facts. When I walked down to him, he didn't look up right away. "No one's being evicted," I said softly. "They're being held accountable." He nodded once. "You should have told me," he said, voice low. "I tried. You just didn't hear it. We stood in the quiet, the morning just beginning to warm." "I'll pay it," he said finally. I know. I didn't thank him. It wasn't a favor. He tucked the papers back into the envelope, stood, and walked toward the house. I let him go. Back in my room, I opened my planner and wrote out the schedule for the next week, maintenance appointments, a call with the notary, and a list of everything they'd left behind that I didn't plan on keeping. The house was quiet when I opened the front door. No chatter from the kitchen, no TV echoing down the hallway, just the soft, familiar creak of the hinges and the scent of salt air drifting through the screen. I stepped inside slowly. The air was cooler now, like the place had finally taken a breath. There were no shoes scattered by the entryway, no towel slumped over the banister. The futon that had blocked the hallway was gone. Even the kitchen counters, which had been buried under snack wrappers and open bags of cereal, were wiped clean. Not spotless, but clean. I walked through each room, not rushing. The bedroom doors were open, sheets stripped. Closet doors left ajar, hangers clinking softly as I passed. One window was still shut, and I opened it wide, letting the breeze roll through. The goats were gone. Rick must have come early to collect them. There was no sign they'd ever been there, no pellets, no hoof prints on the porch. Just a faint scent of grass in the kitchen that made me smile without meaning to. On the dining table beside an empty fruit bowl sat a folded note, my name on the front in Ethan's handwriting. I unfolded it carefully. "We'll stay elsewhere next time. I'm sorry." No signature. No promises. Just that. I stood for a moment reading it twice. Then I walked to the back room, the one they'd claimed on the first night, the one with the best view, and opened the drawer where I used to keep the trust paperwork. The folder was now in my safe, but the drawer still held weight. I placed the note inside and closed it gently. Then I made my way to the linen closet and pulled out a clean set of sheets, this time for myself. As I moved through the house, the floor no longer felt like it belonged to anyone else. By evening, I'd have it back the way it was before they came. And this time, I wouldn't leave it open. A week passed before I noticed how still the mornings had become again. Not empty, just still, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I started in the kitchen, where the cabinet door had hung crooked since the weekend. I tightened the hinge, sanded the edge, and gave it a fresh coat of white. It looked better than before. The spare sheets went back into their basket, folded the way I liked them. I returned the second toaster they'd brought along with a blender I hadn't recognized. It felt good to clear the clutter, 3 boxes in total, donated to the church thrift store down the road. I walked the rooms with a small notebook, marking little things, loose screws, scuffed trim, a stain on the hallway rug. But nothing urgent. Nothing left broken. Out on the porch, I brought out a chair, a pen, and a sheet of heavy cardstock. The same kind I used to print event signs back when I ran staff meetings. I wrote slowly, deliberately. This home is not a rental. It's not a retreat. It's not a reward. It's mine. I laminated the paper and nailed it beside the doorframe just above eye level. No one needed to read it but me. But still, I wanted it there. A boundary in plain sight. That afternoon, I sat by the window with a fresh cup of tea and listened to the sea roll in. The screen door clicked gently in its frame. No one called my name. No one filled the hallway with bags. Later, just before sunset, I stood at the front door. I ran my fingers along the latch, checking that it still clicked cleanly into place. Then I turned the lock from the inside. It was the first time I'd done that all summer. And when I stepped back, the quiet didn't feel like absence anymore. It felt like ownership.